Oh yeah, Robbie's in on it. Robbie knows what's going on. We got the head bob from our man Robbie Strazynski. We're going to be talking to him in just a second. But folks, you're in for a treat when you hear that tune because it's time for another week of the Rec Poker Podcast. I'm your host Jim Reid, Fluffsterini in the home game, and at Rec Poker Jim on Twitter. And I have the best freaking job in the world talking poker with my friends here on the forums edition of the podcast. We're going to be talking to Robbie in just a sec. But first, of course, I have to thank our sponsors, the Running Aces Hotel, Racetrack, and Casino. We couldn't do what we do without their support, and also support from our premium members who take part in our training material and study opportunities for only $15 a month. And you can get your first month for only $5 by using the code RecPoker at checkout. Here at Rec Poker, we play for fun, but it's more fun when you win. So we study together, we play together, we celebrate together, and it all starts with a free membership at rec.poker, where all it takes to join is an email address and a smile. Now, they let me host the show on Mondays, but I'm just one man. It takes a group, a gang, a village, a crew to make all the magic happen around here. We call this group of wizards the Wrecking Crew. And if you want to learn more about me or the rest of the Wrecking Crew, you can head on over to rec.poker/crew, or you can just listen up because you're going to meet a few of them right here tonight on the air.
I'm John Somsky, also known as Poker Geek MN everywhere.
Hey, I'm Joseph Wills. I am hockey_poker on the new application they call X and hockey_poker 702 in the home game.
Thanks, guys. And I mentioned at the top of the show, we are joined by the one and only Robby Strazynski. Robbie, you wear a lot of hats in the poker world. You go by many names. But what most people know about you is that you are a really fun-loving, generous lover of mixed games. Mixed games are very close to your heart. Home games are a big part of your experience. You're a great influence on the poker world. Thanks for coming back on the Rec Poker Podcast.
Well, for a description like that, I'll come on any podcast. Very, very kind. I appreciate it. And it's good to speak with you, see you again. Also, John, it's nice to see you again. And Joseph, real nice to meet you. It's always fun talking poker, and I'm happy to do that. And of course, just push the mixed game, the gospel as far as I possibly can.
Yeah, well, you've been involved in so many different parts of the poker world, poker media. The thing that it feels like is kind of closest to your heart right now is the Mixed Game Festival that you throw from time to time. You've got one coming up, which I'm really interested in talking to you about in Las Vegas, starting in late November, right around the corner. But tell us a little bit about sort of what caused you to start having this Mixed Game Festival, because that feels like that's a real pivot point. That must have been very hard to get the first one together.
Oh, sure. I mean, like when you put a snowball together and it rolls down the hill, hacking that snow together first is always the hardest part. Thankfully, we're rolling now, but it's actually, I think it's kind of an unusual story of where it happened. Is I had been working the summers, the three main events in a row for the Poker Go crew. They needed people on their bio team. So 2017, 2018, 2019, I was doing the work there. And the best part about it for me, I'm living all the way in Israel. It means I get to go and be in Vegas during the World Series of Poker. Sure, I got to work, but just being there, so nice. So after that third year, and it's amazing work. It's super tough. You're talking usually anywhere between 12 to 15, 16-hour days. And it's a tremendous experience. And for someone like myself who works in poker media, it's an amazing way to meet a lot of people, to network, and then just really be in the heart of the entire poker universe for a couple weeks. So it's a great opportunity. I'm glad to have had it. After that third year, the end of 2019, and I got back home and I was telling my wife, I was like, I think I've gotten what I could out of doing that work. And the fact of the matter is, thankfully, my own site, Card Player Lifestyle, my business is growing. So I think I don't want to continue doing that next summer. And my wife's remark was, okay, well, you better figure out a way to get back to Las Vegas then. So, so that's the origin story of like, I couldn't just take it for granted. I can't drive there. It's 7,500 miles away. So I better figure out a good reason to justify a trip like that. So that's when my wheels got started spinning. And from there, it was just sort of a natural confluence of factors of, well, I love mixed games, and I wonder if I could put together some sort of a meetup of mixed game enthusiasts, or something that I would love to attend if someone else had announced it. And, just putting two and two together and thinking, okay, I've kind of have these connections. Maybe I could get sponsors from here and there. It was, again, like a very rough set of ideas. But what ended up happening was, yeah, that idea of like, yeah, I think we have enough people that would buy into this idea, create some cash games, a tournament. I worked with Poker Stars actually that first time, and they were like, would you like a platinum pass to give away? And I'm like, huh, you know, so I was like, yes,
Amazing.
absolutely. The pandemic happened. So I was about to announce it, and then the pandemic happened literally 24 hours before. So I was like, well, hold on. 18 months later, finally, like we just held on to that idea. The first mixed game festival ended up happening in October 2021. And this one coming up is number 6. So that's the origin story. And thankfully, I want to say each new iteration of the festival, with more experience that I've gained and more people that I've met, we're really gaining some what's the word? Some
Well,
real traction and moving in the
yeah.
right direction. It's growing.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, clearly. And it's funny talking about origin stories, you can't talk about the Rec Poker podcast without talking about card player lifestyle. And you've been a friend of the show here for a long time, sharing our podcast episodes on your site. You've got a great set of resources there for recreational poker players and a great team. I don't need to tell you, the people that you've got contributing to what you're going on there are phenomenal. And I feel sort of like equally blessed to be in this place in the poker world where like all these people chip in and help because they can tell that, what you're doing, you've got a good cause in front of you. And that's an easy thing to get behind. So we're going to actually announce today the 2024 Rec Poker mixed game schedule. We're going to get some feedback from you about some of the games that we're going to be playing next year. But first, tell us exactly what can people look forward to in November in Las Vegas coming up? What are the dates? How do people get involved? And what are some highlights that you think will be the most exciting elements of it?
Sure. Oh, thanks very much for those kind words. I appreciate it and definitely feel like a kindred spirit.
That's nice.
That's for sure. So our dates, it's November 26th through 30th, Sunday through Thursday at Resorts World. That's where the Mixed Game Festival is going to take place. I would say the heart and soul of the festival is just the 24/7 dealer's choice cash games that we've got going on. And it's super low entry point. It's 4-8 limit, and it's all limit games. There's no limit games. There's no pot limit games. It's just limit games, meaning, if you sit down at a 4-8 with 2 racks of chips, $200, you could sit and have a blast for hours and hours and hours. You don't need to worry, oh, I might lose my stack. You'll get bad beat plenty of times, but it won't cost you your whole. That's just the way it is.
Yeah.
And you'll put bad beats on other people, but like, oh, okay, sure, $8 more for a pot of 112. Yeah, sure, let's try. Let's see what happens. So that's really the heart and soul. And we've got, anywhere from 1 in the 3 to 4 a.m. spot, one table going, but up to possibly half a dozen tables going of 4-8, 8-16 mixed games. In addition to that, we've got 2 tournaments. They're on the schedule on Monday. It's Omaha 8 or better stud 8 or better mix. It's $260. And then on and that's going to be at 12 p.m. And then on Thursday, that's our grand finale horse tournament, also $260 buy-in. Horse is the 5 games: Holdem, Omaha 8 or better. Holdem, Omaha, stud 8 or better. Stud 8 or better. And I missed Raz.
There's got to be Raz in there somewhere. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm not a big fan of Raz. And I love the game, but everyone knows you want to tick Robbie off, put him a little slightly on tilt.
I've seen that.
Call Raz.
Chad McBean has something to say about that on Twitter, I think.
And for the horse, why is it our grand finale? So the winner, besides the lion's share of the prize pool, is also going to get a WPT Voyage prize package worth $5,000.
Hmm.
So that's a cruise for two on next spring when the WPT does that full ship takeover on the Valiant
Yeah.
Lady, and a seat in the $1,100 WPT Prime event that's going to be taking place aboard the ship. So it's a pretty darn amazing first prize. Other stuff we've got going on, we've got a book signing with Amanda Botfeld. She wrote a Girl's Guide to Poker. That'll be our Women's Wednesday. We've got a poker trivia competition that we're going to do. We're going to give away some nice prizes. And just to kick things off, at noon on Sunday, November 26th, pizza party. Who doesn't love pizza? So come for the
Nice.
poker or come for stay for the poker. So.
Well, it sounds like a lot of fun. I think what I like most about it, and the other ones that I've seen going on in the past, is there is this sort of like stop by element. Like there's cash games. You can sit down whenever you want, stand up whenever you want, play a bunch of different games, for which is kind of like dip a toe in without risking your whole bankroll, like you say. I know John Somsky, it's been part of his mandate here for the last few years to expose more no limit hold'em players to mixed games and all the fun that you can have there. So we're trying to sort of just get some cross contamination going here as much as possible for these no limit hold'em players, because life's too short to not play mixed games. I'm sure you'll agree.
Well,
I
whenever
will
you go
tell
into
you-
a card room, it tends to be the mixed games table where the people are having the most fun.
Yes. Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. And I would tell you, many people have stopped by and it's like, hey, what's going on? What is all this stuff? Like I said, all the action, all the fun is happening. So there's natural curiosity. What are they playing? And they see these wacky games, and bar none, literally bar none, anyone who has sat down and given it a try, we're all very friendly. No one's out to make coin or anything. We're out to, share and teach and, make an enjoyable type of event. All the players are like that. They'll like, oh, wow, I'm never going back to Holdem after this. This is just so much more fun. So we don't Holdem, and that's fine, but the Mixed Game Festival, let's shine the spotlight on the other game.
I love it. Well, let's shine a spotlight on some of those other games. Exactly. I'm not going to turn down a segue like that. So John Somsky runs our home game club here, and I mentioned mixed games are very close to his heart. Every month we have a different mixed game being played on the second Wednesday of the month as part of our Player of the Year race to find out who's going to be the mixed game champion here at RecPoker. So John, we're going to break news today announcing the schedule, so we'll know what the games are for each of the months coming up. But that, just in case some folks are not familiar with these mixed games, we also have practiced mixed games on the other Wednesdays of the month of the previous month. So by the time you get to the actual Player of the Year mixed game, you've had a chance to warm up a few times and try some things out. And we're also going to be releasing podcast with fantastic folks like Robbie every month leading up to these, going over some of the sort of the strategic elements that you might want to employ if you're just dipping a toe into some of these new mixed games. So John, starting in January, and people will know it's the second Wednesday of the month in each month, what's the mixed game schedule that we can start looking forward to, and and why did you choose these games and in this order?
So the reason I chose the games in the order was to kind of build upon your knowledge, to try to get to things so that you didn't have to learn everything all at once. So we aren't going to jump straight into horse where you have to learn a bunch of different games or play a bunch of different games. In January, we're actually doing 5-card draw. This is the game that most people prior to the poker boom, when Holdem became the predominant game, this is the game you saw played on TV. If you ever watched old episodes of The Odd Couple, this is what they were playing, 5-card draw. It's where you have all 5 cards in your hand. So we're playing no limit 5-card draw in January.
And is that a one-time draw of up to 5 cards? Am I understanding that correctly?
It is a single draw. So you get dealt
Single
5
draw.
cards, and then you have a betting round, and then you can exchange up to all 5 cards, and you
Okay.
will get new cards for the ones that you exchange.
All right. And now that even a no limit Hold'em player like me recognizes that game. Yes, I've seen it in Maverick and all the old Westerns. And yeah, I also grew up playing draw poker. So that one's fun. I think a lot of people will sort of know what they're getting into with that.
Right. So, and it's no limit. So people are used to that. That's why we're starting there. Then in February, we're going to one of my favorite games, which is No Limit Deuce to Seven Single Draw. This is also, if you've ever heard Bernard Lee talk about this game, he loves to wax poetic about it. I think it's his favorite mixed game as well. So in this game, you are also given 5 cards, and you play it just like 5-card draw, but instead of going for the best hand, you're going for the worst hand. So you want, that's why deuce through 7, 7, 5, 4, 3 deuce, that is not all of the same suit, is the best possible hand. Because if it's the same suit, you have a flush.
Right.
If you have a, 3 through 7, then you have a straight. So that's why it's called deuce to 7 no limit single draw.
And so this is the game that's for all the people that complain that they can never make a hand and hold them. That they should love this game.
Yes, it is.
No, that's Raz.
Yeah, okay.
When the World Series of Poker
Robbie.
started, it was a contest on whether or not Hold'em or deuce to 7 single draw was going to be the championship event. Many people consider it purest form of poker because you get one draw, there's no shared information other than what people drew, and it's just, does the player have it or not? And it's unlike Hold'em, or I mean unlike 5-card draw, almost no one ever gets a straight flush. Whereas if you play, you will be dealt a pat 7, or you will draw to a pat 7 over the course of at least a few sessions. You'll get one.
I see. Interesting. Yeah, I kind of like the way you think about that. That's cool. That's cool.
And then in March, when we're talking mixed games, we're mainly talking non-Hold'em, where this is probably the least mixed of mixed games, Pot Limit Omaha. That's also one of the probably a runner-up for the second most popular game that's played. I mean, Hold'em far and away has everything else beat. Pot Limit Omaha is probably number 2 there. Then in April, we move on to Limit Hold'em. So this is just like the Hold'em, but instead of being able to bet any amount you want, the first round you start off and you can raise in increments of whatever the big blind is. So you have your blinds just like no limit Hold'em, but then the person following that can either call those blinds, or if they make a raise, they make it to double that. And typically you are playing with either, depending upon the place you play, you either have a 4 or a 5 raise cap per round.
Per street, yeah.
Per street, right, per street. And then so the first 2 streets, you do the size of the big blind. And then on the last 2 streets, the betting increment doubles. So that's what's known as the small bet and the big bet. So if you're playing 4-8, like Robbie was talking about, the first 2 rounds, you would be betting $4, and then the last 2 rounds you would be betting $8 and raising in increments of $8.
All right. Now
I'll
these
also
first
just throw in one little thing,
Yeah.
is that everyone knows Texas Hold'em is the Cadillac of poker. Limit Hold'em is known as the Oldsmobile of poker. Just throwing.
Yeah. Well, I know a lot of a lot of earlier players moved from limit to no limit, and limit Hold'em was very a very active game for a long time. So, and it's interesting. Yeah, and as these months come up, we'll get into some more of the strategic elements for some of these, but sort of like the flavor of the game, I find it very interesting as it changes between no limit and limit, and other little changes like that. So these first 4 that you talked about, John, I feel like I'm already sort of familiar with these. I'm going to be pretty comfortable playing these, even though I'm not like a mixed game expert or anything. So we're dipping our toe in well, I think. The
Right.
water feels great so
Yep.
far.
So the
I
first,
think for
yeah, the
these
first month,
next ones, I think you guys are going to need to sort of entice me to try something that's going to feel very, very different to what I'm used to as a no limit Hold'em player.
well, the first month, we got you used to doing draw game. The second month, we continued with draw, but went low ball. Third month,
I can do
we
that.
went to, a pot limit game and a game with a board to
I've
get
heard
you
of it
used to
though.
that. And now in May, and then we went to limit Hold'em. Now in May, we're going to go to something that is a little bit different. It's still what I would consider a low ball game. It's Limit Badugi. This is one of my favorite games. I know several people who absolutely love it and several who absolutely hate it. So it can be a polarizing game there. But with this game, you are dealt 4 cards. And what you want is the lowest possible hand. So an ace is considered low in this, with no pairs and no duplicate suits. So an ace through 4 rainbow is the best possible hand in Badugi. And the way it works is if you have 4 cards that are non-paired, non-suited, they play. And any 4-card Badugi beats any 3-card Badugi, and so forth and so on. So if you have 2 to the same flush or 2 to the same suit, you'd throw out the higher card of those, and then your remaining 3 cards would give you a 3-card Badugi. And the best 3-card Badugi obviously is 3 2 deuce ace. So you keep on going down, and it's relatively, I don't want to say hard. I mean, 4-card Badugis happen regularly, but not, it is possible to win the hand with a 3-card Badugi on a semi-regular basis as well. 2-card, probably not so much. But it's kind of fun. I like low ball games, so this is a low ball game. It's a draw game. There isn't any shared information, so that makes you think in a different way than in Hold'em. So it's a good one there.
Just one
And
little
if I
extra thing.
can,
It's a triple draw game. You get 3 chances. Right.
Yes, triple draw,
Mhm.
triple draw. And this is the first triple draw game that we've introduced here. The other ones each had 1 drawing round. These have 3 drawing rounds, and it's played limit, so it does the same small bet for the first 2 rounds, big bet for the last 2 rounds. The same type of format that we were using in Limit Hold'em.
right,
And
and if I'm
now,
not mistaken, the WSOP just introduced Badugi as a bracelet event this year.
yes, they
And
have
so if you
had,
have Poker Go, yeah, you can probably find it in their WSOP archive for this past year. So if you want to
Nice.
go and kind of watch how the action goes, it's probably on Poker Go, or you can probably just YouTube it as well for that. But
they
yeah,
have had it,
WSOP introduced that.
they've had it for a few years in their dealer's choice event. But this is the first year that they actually did it as a standalone, all Badugi all the time.
Now, Robbie, I know Badugi as the game that's the most fun to say out loud. Which to me feels like hands down. It is. Just try it at home, folks. Badugi. Like that does sound like a good time. But is there to entice me to play a little bit? What is it as someone who's not involved in mixed games as much? What is it that I'll like about Badugi if I come and dip a toe in?
Okay, so first of all, I'm always a big fan of draw games. So the nice, like in Hold'em, once you get your hand, that's the hand you have. You know what I'm saying? You're stuck with it. And the fact that you can draw cards and get better cards is fun. So like that, I just like it. So,
Nice.
and it's fun to squeeze. It's Badugi is very different than essentially any other poker game because we're not talking about the standard ranking of, royal flush, straight flush, or from low to high either. It's 4 different cards, 4 different suits, and it's fun to chase. Now, it's also costly to chase. So, but even at low limits, that can add up quickly. And as John rightly pointed out, sometimes a 3-card will win, sometimes a 4-card with a 4-card king. You know, you have ace 2, 7 king will beat an ace 2, 3 or a 2, 3, 4 or something like that. So there is a luck element involved in catching the card. Sometimes you could be dealt a Pat Badugi 10 Jack Queen King, and then hang on for dear life while everyone tries to catch up to you, because at $4 and $8 a pot, it's tough to push people out. So
Right.
sometimes you have to know to break it. There's a lot of fun considerations, and again, especially when playing at low limit, it's the easiest way to learn and familiarize yourself with. So you ready to play some Badugi, Jim?
I mean, I want to get in there. Put me
There
in,
you
coach.
go. Okay.
Put me in.
Excellent. So then in June, we're introducing the concept of a split pot game.
Oh boy.
So a split pot game is where there are 2 winners, potentially even more, actually. I mean, just like in Holdem, you can chop a pot, you can chop the halves as well here. But part of it goes to the high hand, part of it goes to the low hand. So we're going to play Limit Omaha 8 or better. Now, what the 8 or better refers to is you have to, in order to qualify for a low, someone has to have their highest card be an 8. So the best 5-card hand with the highest card in the 8. Now, unlike deuce to 7 single draw, here straights and flushes do not count against you. So the best possible hand is known as the wheel, ace through 5. And it doesn't matter if it's the same suit or not. It can be any cards. Ace through 5 would be the best possible hand. And you have to have 5 cards that are lower than an 8 to even qualify. If you don't, then you don't even qualify for the low portion of the hand. Everyone always qualifies for the high portion of the hand. And this is played just like Omaha, so everyone is dealt 4 cards, and then you have the standard flop, turn, and river that you're getting each time. It's played limit, so the first 2 hands you have your small bet, the first 2 rounds, and then the last 2 streets you have your big bets that you're playing there. And then at the end, you turn over your cards, and whoever has the highest hand gets that half of the pot. And if multiple people tie, you split it. And whoever has the lowest hand gets that portion of the pot. And it's kind of an interesting game because you can, particularly on the low half, you can have the nuts. But depending, like let's say with Omaha, as hopefully people know, you play 2 from your hand and 3 cards from the board. So if you're holding an ace deuce in your hand and the board has 3 cards between 3 and 8 on it, and that's it, there's no ace or deuce, you're holding the nut low. But it could be because that is a desirable hand. It's not uncommon for 2 or maybe even 3 people to have that ace deuce, in which case the high person is sitting there pounding chips into the pot and gets half of the pot, and then everyone else has to split the low portion of the pot with their ace deuce. So that's, if you're doing it with one other person, that's what's known as getting quartered, for example. So it brings another element into the game series.
Now, when I was learning split pot games like this, and Robbie, I don't know if this was the same for you, we had to declare whether we were going high or low or both by like the number of chips in our hand or something like that. I sense that that's gone out of vogue in public card rooms for like security reasons. Can you talk a little bit about that or how you learned this game as well?
Sure. So I can't speak necessarily to the security aspects in public card rooms, but home game wise, yeah, that idea of a declare, I mean, that's like almost synonymous with home games. It's just, again, adds another kind of fun element. You know, you put 1 chip in your hand or 2 chips in your hand or 3 if you want to go both ways, right? And sometimes you can declare low, but everyone else declares high, even though you have a crappy low, and then you luck into half the pot, or vice versa. That's the declare aspect. And, you know, it's a fun wrinkle of home games. I personally am grateful that that's not the case in card rooms. Typically more money tends to be at stake than in, like penny and, 10 cent, 25 cent home games, that sort of a thing. And the fact of the matter is, in high-low split games, that qualifier aspect is kind of an important thing. Because you can be holding in an Omaha ace 2 3 4, but if the 5 board cards don't come, that there are 3 of them that are 8 or lower, you stayed until the end and you don't have a low. So that's the aspect. Ideally, the good beginner's tip we give for a high-low player is go for the low and back into the high, right? Because that stick with the low cards. But if that low doesn't come, it'll end up costing you. Like you can already know on the flop, in principle, King, Queen, Jack comes. Okay, there's not going to be a low. What a shame to throw in my beautiful ace 2 3 4 straight into the mud. It doesn't really have much value in. So that's basic type of concepts for high-low games. In a home game setting, live home game setting, that declare aspect again throws another wrinkle to it. It's kind of fun, but if you want to just sort of practice it straight up without the declare element, I would say that's the better way to get familiar with the game first.
Yeah, we should clarify what makes the declare so hard. So if you declare you're going low, even if you have the best high hand, you are not entitled to that pot. You're only playing for the low half. Likewise, if you declare you're going high, you're only entitled to that half. So you might ask, why wouldn't you always go both ways then? It's because you have to win both ways. Otherwise, you get nothing. So you have to be right. Yeah, or tie. But you have to have the best hand both ways. You might tie with someone and then you split that pot accordingly. But it makes it interesting. It is kind of fun for a home game, but I am glad that it's not done in casinos. Here, you're just going to be able to flip your cards over, and you don't even need to worry if you don't understand how to read both ways, because it can be a little confusing at first in Omaha trying to figure out what is my low, what is my high. Flip them up, the dealer will tell you and give you the appropriate portion of the pot. As a matter of fact, other players will also help you if the dealer's not all that
that quick
up to speed on those types
I
of
can
things.
concur.
Tabled your hand.
If you tabled your hand. Right. You have to put it down
your hand
on the ground. Don't just hold it up and show it to people. That doesn't count. Got to be tabled.
That probably picks the game up a little bit too, tabling and not having to decide which one you're going for and declaring and that kind of thing as well. That makes sense. All right, thanks, John. Keep rocking on, brother.
All right, so the next thing we're introducing is the concept of no shared cards. And this is we're continuing with the split pot game. This is stud 8 or better. So as far as the hand rankings, everything's the same as it was in Omaha 8 or better. In order to qualify for the low, you have to have 5 cards that are 8 or lower. Aces count low in the low portion, and they count high in the high portion. It should also be made note of that in both Omaha and in stud, you don't have to use the same 5 cards for low that you use for high. You can use a different combination of cards for each of those. But anyway, with stud, we're playing it in 7-card stud style. So the differences with this hand is stud is not a blind game. It is an ante game. So everyone starts anteing all the way around the pot. Typically, the antes are, anywhere from a quarter to a tenth of whatever the small blind or the small bet would be. It varies. I mean, you do it to make it convenient for what chips you have as well, but it's typically much smaller than your small blind would be, or your big, much smaller than the big blind.
Right. So like in a 4-8 game, the ante is 1.
Correct. That's a great example.
Just about to say that.
Then you each get dealt 2 down cards, whole cards that only you can see, and then you get dealt 1 up card. So, and everyone has their own up card. It's not a shared board, but everyone is able to see all of the up cards that are on the table. And then you don't start based upon who was dealt. You have what's known as the bring in. And the bring in is typically half the size of whatever the small bet is, or equivalent to what a small blind would be. Again, in a 4-8 game, it would be a $2 bring in. And then that is a forced bet. Whoever has the worst hand card showing. Now, in a high-low game, it's kind of nice because the worst card actually isn't all that bad for you because it would be good for a low. So if you had the deuce of, what is it, dime?
Clubs is the lowest. Yeah,
Yeah.
Deuce of clubs would
Thank
be
you.
the lowest.
it's it's alphabetical.
I know, I
That's
couldn't
a good way.
remember my alphabet. I was going to. Okay, the deuce of clubs would be the lowest possible hand. So if you have that showing up, then you will be the bring in, and then action goes around the table from there. You have the option to call that bring in or to do what's known as complete to the small bet. So you could complete it to $4. After that, every bet in that round would be in increments of $4. So someone could raise to 8 and then raise to 12 and then so forth and so on. You do that, and then after all of the betting is done, and if you folded, you folded, you go to the next round where everyone is dealt one more up card. So that's what's known as 4th Street. First one is 3rd Street. This is 4th Street. You have 4 cards. Easy way to remember it. This again uses the small bet, and the action starts with the best showing hand. So whoever has the best hand showing for high. So if you have an ace king and no one else has any ace king, or if you have a pair, the highest pair, you would be the person to start at that point in time. And then action moves around the table there. 5th Street is the same way. You each get dealt a card, but now you're moving up to the big bet, which is going to be double the amount. In a 4-8 game, it would be $8. And again, action starts on the best possible hand. You move around. 6th Street, same thing. Everyone is getting dealt one more up card. Again, using the big bet. 7th Street, we flip things a little bit, and this time you're dealt a down card. So you have 3 cards down, 4 cards up. Action again starts on whoever has the best hand showing. And it's again the big bet. So you have 3 rounds of big bets. So in stud, you pretty much want to say, before you decide to put any money on 5th Street, where the round doubles, you want to make sure you're drawing to something pretty decent or you have a good hand. That's really the cutoff point to be really conservative moving on to 5th Street, because you do have 3 big bet rounds. It can be, of all of the mixed games, the stud rounds can be the most expensive.
It's because there's more of them, and so there's more opportunities to put money in the pot. That makes sense.
Right.
Correct. And if you're playing, say you're playing horse, you're going to be putting antes in every hand for 3 of the 5 rounds, whereas stud 8 or better. So keep that in mind too, that you're putting money in, regardless if you're winning hands or not.
And whenever you're playing, it seems like at some point in time, the poker gods will look down upon some person and they will have the bring in for like 4 hands in a row, something like that.
Can I interject one little sentence?
Yeah, please, Robbie.
So if this is the point where I think the standard Texas Holdem, maybe Omaha player may go, okay, my brain's overloaded. So much information, so many terms, so many new things to do. And it's tough, especially when you go to like a dealer's choice table or you see like, 8 different games being played, 16 different games. It's overwhelming, right? So, deep breath, everybody. If you're listening and just learning these games for the new time, most of it is so straightforward. Like usually when you're playing in a mix, you'll have 6, 7, maybe 8 hands, 6 or 7 usually hands of each game. By the time it's like the 3rd hand, fourth hand of each game, you're already used to it. Maybe you're not a master in the game already, but this idea of third speed and fourth speed or second draw, third draw, the fixed limit betting, once you're in the game and, you know, keeping your wits about you, keeping your eyes open, paying attention to things, it's really not too tough. And the great thing about poker, it's always free to fold. You know, in a stud game, sure, you put your $1 in there, but it's free to fold and observe and pay attention. And very quickly, you know, if you got that poker aptitude and you love the game, you'll be able to master it. So no need to worry, folks. You know, it's not too crazy intimidating. Even if you have super experienced players, you know, you'll get used to things pretty quickly.
And if you're at all
Yeah,
like
and-
me, sorry, Joseph, please.
Oh, no, just to add to that, especially in Hold'em or even Omaha, if we fold, we want to see that next card or what we would have gotten. The beauty of the stud games is if someone to your left, say third through sixth street, is still in, you'll see the card that you would have gotten if you fold because it's going to be
True.
face up and it would have been your card. So you can kind of gauge, you know, did you make the right fold? Should you have stayed in? So just a little bit of extra information in those games.
I love that. I love that because we're all human. We do want to know. We want to close that loop, right? So there's some rabbit hunting built into it here. That's fantastic. So, yeah, Robbie, please.
And in the home games, away from the casinos, you always like, you know, tap your buddies. What'd you get? You know, what was that card? what was it? Let me know what the last card was. You know, that's the beauty of the home game. Right?
Don't do that in the casino because
No.
there you will be chastised. But yes, perfectly.
And I love what Robbie's saying there. If you're at all like me, you really enjoy doing things for the second time. I find the first time I try things, I find I'm like, oh, I'm already overwhelmed. Like, why did I try and do something new? This is chaos and craziness. But as soon as I do it for the second time, I'm like, oh yeah, all right, I'm getting this. Which is why I encourage our folks, join our free home game club. The first Wednesday of every month is our Player of the Year race for No Limit Hold'em. The second Wednesday of every month is our Player of the Year race for the Mixed Game Championship. But on the third and fourth Wednesday of every month, we're playing these mixed games as a practice game. They don't count towards your point standings. They're just come in and play some hands, get used to the mechanics of the game so that when the second Wednesday of the month comes along and you're going to play this one for the points race, like Robbie says, you've already played a few hands. You've already gotten comfortable with it. And it didn't cost you anything. So that's one of the great things about our home game club. Like you can try all these different variants and kinds of poker, and we take it seriously there. We play for fun, but we really do like coming after those pins. You can see John's got quite a few looking good up there too, John.
All right. So I think we just talked about July and stud 8 or better. So we're going to move on to August. And in August, we are continuing with the stud theme, but we are going back to low ball, pure low ball. So it's Raz. And this is low, similar to Omaha, the best possible, or stud 8 or better, except you don't need the 8 or better. The best possible hand, again, is ace through 5, but any low hand can win. It is possible, although unlikely, that a low pair might even take the pot occasionally in Raz. But Raz is an interesting game because it's one of the few games where you can see, with the knowledge of your hole cards, that you have an opponent drawing dead and you have them completely board locked. And they won't necessarily know that because they don't know how good your hole cards are. Particularly after 5th or 6th Street, you know, you got a couple of rounds where you just know that they cannot catch up to you. So it's a fun game for that particular reason. It's also, if you ever read The Theory of Poker by David Sklansky, many of his examples in there use Raz as the basis for it. Go ahead, Robbie.
Can I give a caveat emptor? So, as fun as Raz is, and it genuinely is fun, it can, in principle, also be a very frustrating game. Unfortunately, there's a famous shirt or logo I've seen on many occasions: Ace 2 3 4 XXX or King 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 or Banana Banana Banana, something like that. You start off with your first 4 cards literally drawn to the absolute best possible hand, and applying pressure and just, already, look at your chops. Oh, I'm going to make so much money. But you cannot control the next cards you're going to be dealt. And it's entirely possible you're going to get a king or carrier card or a queen or a jack and get outdrawn by the person who's holding 7, 8, 9, 10, and then just gets an ace or something. So caveat emptor, it's an enjoyable game, but there is a good deal of pain dealt out in Raz too. As someone who's experienced it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's often like drawing to a flush. And you don't always hit your flushes. So,
Right.
And missing your flush can be pretty painful. And every hand is basically a drawing hand until you've got your 5 cards locked in. And with Raz, it takes a fairly strong hand. I mean, in general, you're not really all that comfortable with an 8 low. You really are more comfortable like with a 7 or a 6. Not that, I mean, 9s and jacks and things like that win as well. But particularly if a lot of people are playing, which often happens, they stick around in the lower limit games. It takes a pretty powerful hand to win at the end.
Right. And conversely, I've been, in the stud game where my ace jack of hearts got beat, flush got beat by ace king of spades on the river. So, you think you have it and you don't have it. But of course, that's on the high side, but still, the pain is the same.
I do sense that that's a lot of what sort of some of our no limit hold'em players are going to experience is just like how quickly the nuts change in these games, and how like we in hold'em we get used to sort of like making a hand pretty early in the process, or at least making some kind of hand early in the process. And it sounds like you kind of have to like build your deck a little bit as you're going with this one, so that I can see that being a little like yeah. So that's a good word of warning. I like that.
So next we move on to September, and we're putting a few of the pieces together, and this is where we're playing horse. So horse is a combination of limit hold'em, Omaha 8 or better, Raz, stud, and stud 8 or better. That's where the E from the horse they're getting from stud 8 or better, cheating a little bit, but it works. And this is the first time that you're actually going to be changing the games through the course of the night. This is a skill. You will, at some point, think you are playing Raz and you're really playing stud, and you're going to be betting big with the worst possible hand. It will happen over the course of your lifetime if you play enough. So you have to pay attention to these things. Now, PokerStars puts the game you're playing up right on the screen. In most casinos, if you're playing there, they will have a plaque that is showing the current game, but you still need to pay attention to it because you are going to be switching between games. Hold'em, it's fairly obvious. You're dealt 2 hold cards. Omaha, it's fairly obvious. You have 4 hold cards and you're playing there. But it's easy to get confused between the stud games. And it'll be interesting how often, like when you're playing Omaha, the dealer stops dealing after 2 cards and you need to remind them, no, we need 2 more here for this one. But it's a lot of fun. Typically in tournament settings, you play each game for a fixed number of hands. So the blind levels go up independent from changing the games. The way I've usually played it is you play 8 hands of each game type. So you play 8 hands of Hold'em, and Hold'em usually goes pretty quick. And then you play 8 hands of Omaha. That takes usually a little longer than a hand of Hold'em, but your blinds still move up at your 10-minute or 20-minute or whatever blind intervals they go up. And you have the big bet and the small bet stays consistent through there, and then they'll tell you what the antes and bring-ins are also if you're playing a stud game.
That is a lot. That's a lot of moving parts out there.
Yeah.
That's a lot of things that so the dealers, like, let's just talk for a second here about how good these dealers have to be, because they're managing a lot of different elements at even within the same hand of this sometimes. Is there Robbie, do you feel like with your experience of live play, Is it do you just need to be a more experienced dealer to deal mixed games? It feels like it must be a harder job than just dealing Hold'em.
It's harder, but I mean, you're talking about the difference between, I don't know what's a good analogy. Fifth grade and eighth grade, kind of hard.
Right.
It's more complex. The thing I'd also sort of mention, and again, people who may be, oh my God, so many games. All poker games can be grouped into three different categories. You have your flop games, your stud games, and your draw games. And as far as the dealer is concerned, all you have to know is which category is it. Oh, there's a flop. I know how to deal a flop game.
Right.
Stud, whether it's Raz, stud 8 or better, that's dealt the same way. And if it's a split pot game, just split the pot. And if it's a draw game, it's a draw. It's a single draw or a triple draw. And again, as far as the dealer, once you've got that idea down, and again, the dealer also has that plaque right there in front of them to remind them of which game it is. Of course, there will be some mistakes of like, oh yeah, I have to deal the next card. But generally speaking, any dealer who gets a job in a poker room usually has to go through the auditions, having done some sort of training. And of course, Hold'em being the most important one in the flop. But any poker room ideally should be testing the dealers also. Do you know how to deal the stud games? Do you know how to deal the draw games? And generally speaking, as you rise up in the limits you play for, the dealers will be more experienced, generally speaking, because of course they rotate as well. But if you're a casino, if you're a poker room, you want your 20-40 players happy and not dealing with, oh, this dealer doesn't know anything. They're rookies. So you'll have like almost like your special teams. The dealers who have more mixed game experience will be okay. You guys rotate in and out of the 20-40 game. So generally speaking, dealers know what they're doing, but like anything, it comes with experience.
Sure.
Right. And to add a wrinkle into that, the trick is, especially on the draw games, what happens when you run out of cards. Then you have to take the discarded and the mucked hand and shuffle them, and you have to keep the mucks away from, I'm getting way into the weeds here, but I've seen that where you keep the discards away from your mucked cards, and then you shuffle, I think, the mucked cards or the anyway. Yeah. So yeah, it can very well be complicated. And yeah, your dealers have to put up with a lot for that.
What I will say about that though, often, again, people who are sitting down at a mixed game table, most of them have some sort of experience. So sometimes you'll have someone very aggressively say, no, that's not what you do. But generally speaking, especially at the lower limits, the players are happy to be helpful to the dealer.
Yeah.
And then of course there's always the floor when there's a question.
Well, and one thing that should be kept in mind, your next event is at Resorts World, right, Robbie?
Oh yeah.
Resorts World has excellent dealers, and they deal mixed games regularly. So you will have no problem. And everyone at a mixed game table, particularly at Robbie's event, is going to come in and help everyone understand the rules of the game. The rules, it's not a secret. They want you to understand how you're playing. Everyone will help you with those. Now, obviously, while you're in the middle of a hand, you might not want to get too much, but they're going to tell you when it's your turn to act. They're going to tell you how to fold, so you don't need to worry about it. It'll be a very comfortable experience, and they'll really help you along with that. It's also great to try online, because if you're going online, the software won't let you do anything wrong, and you'll get used to the flow of the games that way.
Right.
I'll add one last.
Resorts.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead,
I won't
Robbie.
forget.
Resorts. Yeah, it's a great room, and I mean they play, I think, 80, 160 mixed games regularly. So their dealers know what they're doing. They have some good clientele that play there. So yeah, Resorts is an excellent room.
Sure. And I would say just one additional thing as related to dealing, Holdem, and part of the reason, among many, but one of the major reasons poker rooms are always splitting Holdem is the number of hands you can get in per hour, up to 30 usually, right? Mixed games take longer to deal with all these draws. So what I would say is, let's say you're getting between 15 to 20 hands per hour in a really good mixed game, tip well. Like remember, the dealer's dealing fewer hands. be a good, a good client, a good player, and even at the low limits, be kind to the dealers. They're dealing fewer hands, so make them want to come back and deal the mixed games too.
And let me hammer that point home, because often where dealers get paid is on tips, and they get paid tips by the winner of the hand. So if they're dealing fewer hands, fewer people are winning hands, they're making fewer tips. So you might also tip up a little bit if you're playing in a slower game. From the casino's point of view, Robbie, they also take their rake often per pot. So is there an incentive towards moving to like a timed rake or a session fee for mixed games, because that kind of standardizes, it doesn't matter as much how quickly the hands are getting dealt, they might make more money that way?
On a macro level, when you're talking about from the room and then the more experienced players, yes, I would say that. Again, like for my mixed game festival, some people are playing 4-8 regularly, 8-16 regularly. I mean, maybe 8-16, you're trying really hard to grind out a living, but generally speaking, 4-8, no one's coming like, okay, I'm going to make coin, right? The higher you play, then yeah, the dollars matter a little bit more, and that's sort of you're coming to with the idea of really trying to make money. So yes, like in that 81-60 game and higher as well, they often take a time rake, which is requested by the players, granted by the room as well. It's just as far as like that's the relationship. We want you coming, we'll accommodate you. And the players are like, hey, when you get to be this high, an 81-60 at 300, 600, you're not going to be paying, $50 a hand rake or something like that. So yeah, the time becomes a factor, but for beginners, for folks who were explaining how the games, that's not, you'll get there. You'll get to that level.
Yeah.
Okay, we take a time rate. So.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. All right. Good answer. And just remember, folks, always tip your dealers. All right, John,
Yes.
What's next?
So next we wanted to, for people who like action and who like good hands,
Oh, boy.
we thought we would introduce 6+ Holdem. It's also commonly known as short deck. So this is just like no limit Holdem that you're used to, except all of the deuces through fives have been removed from the deck.
Oh,
So the 6 is the lowest card in the deck. One interesting
This is
thing.
like Chris Jones would not approve of this form of poker.
Right, yeah. There are no fives in the deck.
He's already soured on this entire operation. Chris, if you're still listening, don't worry. We're going to talk about some other hands later. Don't worry. Some other kinds of variants. We'll be able to play with fives again in no time.
If you've heard about the outrageous games that they've been playing in Macau, that Phil Ivey and the big players have been in, this is one of the most common games that they play there, 6+ Holdem, and it is because it's an action game. In the game, the hand rankings actually change a little bit. It's easier to get a full house than it is to get a flush. Therefore, a flush beats a full house in 6+ Holdem. Also, on Poker Stars, this is played only at 6 max tables. So you'll be sitting with 6 people at the table. Other than that, it's played just like normal no limit Holdem.
So it seems to me, thinking about it for the first time, you must see more straights too, just because there's fewer cards that like more of the card. What am I trying to say? There's less of a deck to make up.
The hand rankings are, you'll see lots of full houses,
right.
Lots of straights.
And so that I find like the relative strength of your hand is something that takes players a long time to get to recognize, because we all know the absolute hand rankings. Right. But sort of being able to recognize like how strong is my hand really relative to the other hands that players could make here, that takes some nuance and some experience to find. So this feels like a new equilibrium where you kind of have to reevaluate how strong is my hand in fact.
And I have not played enough of it to have a real good feel, but I mean, I do know that like 3 of a kind, which is a really strong hand in Holdem, it's not as strong in short deck.
Right.
No. And I know that Triton has that as an event when they hold their series. And I think they hold 2 or 3 series a year. Look them up on YouTube because they broadcast those live and it's all in the archive. So if you want to look at short deck, then yeah, just search the Triton series, and you're bound to find an event on there.
Right. And I'll also just add as well, this might be obvious, but in case it's not, short deck is only ever played on its own. It's never part of a mix for the obvious reason that
You'd have
you
to
can't just play a game and then, okay, let's remove all the cards and let's bring back the cards for the next game. So if you're going to play short deck, that's kind of a universe unto itself.
Great point. Great point.
So now we're on to November. And we are going back to draw another triple draw game. This time we're doing limit deuce to 7 triple draw. So it's the same deuce to 7. In other words, straights and flushes count against you. But now you are getting 3 drawing rounds, and it is played as a limit game. First 2 round or the first 2 betting rounds are the small bet, and the last 2 are the big bet. So 4-8 before for the first 2. 8 for the last 2. And it's typically played with blinds. So you'd have a $2, $4 blind in that, the 4-8 example. And you get 3 shots at drawing to make your best possible hand. So the strength of the hands is quite a bit stronger in triple draw, obviously, than single draw.
Right. That makes sense.
Anything else to add, anyone?
Aces are bad. Straights and flushes count against you.
Yep.
That
Well,
sums it up.
John, I do like the way that you've built this calendar out, because by the time we do get to the end here, like you say, we're already familiar with a lot of these individual concepts, and it's more sort of putting them together. So kudos, man. That's really smart.
Right. Are we going to play Chalaha for December? See,
No,
I knew I would get a laugh from Robbie.
Poker Stars does not offer Chalaha in the home games. But we're on to the next most common mix game. Horse is probably the most common. Next is 8-game mix. So 8-game mix has all of the horse varieties in there. Plus you're adding in a round of no limit hold'em, a round of PLO, and deuce to 7 limit triple draw. So we've played all of the hands now that are in 8-game mix previously in the year. Now you're just playing them as part of that mix. I don't remember what order they're played in off the top of my head on Poker Stars, but it's similar to horse. You play a certain number of hands of each game, and after you finish that number of hands, you move on to the next game, and the blinds move up relative to the clock.
And just to reinforce the point, in case our listeners didn't haven't been sticking around. So in each of those games, like they could be limit or no limit, they could be blind or ante, they could be stud or draw or flop. Are there different 8-game mixes from different places, or when people say 8-game, it's always the same 8 games? And
8-game mix, just like horse is horse. Horse is a horse, of course.
Of course.
8-game mix is always these games.
Okay.
If you are playing a mix that happens to be 8 games, you wouldn't call it 8-game mix.
Right.
It would be, you'd specify what it is.
Right. Like, for instance, and I've seen it at South Point, where they'll get a game of horse, but they don't want to play limit hold'em, so they'll put in 2 to 7 triple draw, and they'll call it torse because they get rid of the H and put in a T. So you'll see variants like that, but it'll absolutely specify which games are being played.
All right.
Yeah,
And then Robbie.
In a pure dealer's choice mix, what you'll have happen is, everyone will come to the table. They'll look through all of the different plaques, and each person will choose 1 or 2 games. You put them all together, so 7 players, and that's your game mix. And among the players, it'll just sort of decide. Every orbit, the game will change, and the plaque will go underneath to the bottom.
Cool. I guess so. And we do our championship game at the end of the season. Our player of the year race will crown who has the most points at the end of these 12 months. And John, I believe we count the best 10 scores out of your possible 12 scores. So if you miss a month, or if you don't perform well in a month or two, that's not the end of the world. Even if you don't join us right in January, you can still start as late as March and still get 10 months to count towards your Player of the Year points. And then independent of the Player of the Year, we also have our championship, which is, I think, on the 4th Wednesday in December. And this is for everyone who's won one of the monthly tournaments that we run, plus the next so many Player of the Year points earners to fill out those, I think, 2 or 3 tables. Or John, I'm not sure exactly how you run that. What am I
there will be 24 players who qualify for the Tournament of Champions. If you win a tournament, you automatically qualify. So we'll take however number of winners. There will probably be someone who wins 2. So let's say we have 11 winners, those that get in there. And then we go through the highest point earners down until we get to 24 people who will be invited to play in that Tournament of Champions.
Fantastic.
And for that, you may ask, well, what do you do for a Tournament of Champions in a mixed game? Because the whole point of mix is changing things up. Well, we're doing the broadest spectrum that we can. So for the Tournament of Champions, we are also playing 8-game mix.
Great. And so people will already sort of be familiar with it because that's the game in December as well, for that 2nd Wednesday of the month, to close out the series.
And the individual games we've played at other times throughout the year as well.
Yeah. So get involved, folks. All it takes is a free account at rec.poker, and all it takes to sign up there is an email address and a smile, although both are mandatory. Our home game club has over 450 members, I think. We play most nights. We have mixed games and no limit Holdem. We've got a heads up challenge every quarter where you can win your way into Marek Madness. We give away these fantastic pins for people that rise to the top of various challenges and tournaments that we have. We have got a lot of bragging rights, get shouted out on the podcast, and learn some new fun games. It's a really fun way to get involved, and it costs you nothing. So just like the podcast, if you're still listening, I think you'd fit right in as we cross the hour mark talking about mixed games here. Robbie, is there anything else that we should let our folks know about before we round this baby up and close out today's show? I know what other than exploring mixed games, I was going to say, what's one thing our audience could do to make your life better? And I know exploring mixed games and like broadening their horizons would be one of them. But is there like a newsletter, or would you like people to go to cardplayerlifestyle.com, or what's the one thing that people could do to like support what you're doing in the poker world?
All the above.
Yeah.
I'll try to do a quick laundry list. Yeah, the website is cardplayerlifestyle.com. We do have a newsletter you can sign up for right there. Spread the word, basically. If you like what you consume, tell people about it. And the same goes for like the Mixed Game Festival is in a way a natural extension of the brand. Everything that we do as far as like promoting goodness, positivity, great poker stories, that's sort of comes to fruition in Mixed Game Festival format. You got lots of poker celebs show up, Hall of Famers, and I just actually announced, Tony Dunst, he's going to be doing the Shuffle Up and Deal for the big horse event on Thursday, November 30th. So even if you don't want to play, come say hi, come, join us for the pizza party. You'll have a great time. Just again, if you do, spread the word. That's basically it. And follow us on Twitter. I'm at CardPlayerLife, and also at Poker Life Media.
Right on. Well, thank you so much for your time and your enthusiasm. And like I say, just continuing to be a bright light here in the poker world. And of course, Joseph and John, thank you for your contributions tonight. And John Somsky, I don't think people appreciate the amount of work that you do here to keep our Rec Poker members happy and challenged and enjoying what we're doing. So if people don't know, I mean, John works really hard at this stuff. This whole home game club started with 1 or 2 home games a month. And that's what he agreed to. When we were putting this together, John agreed to manage 2 home games a month. And we play a lot more than 2 a month now, and we've been doing it for a long time. And you just I hope people appreciate what you're doing here, because you make a lot of people happy. People really enjoy our free home game club, and it's all because of you, John. So thank you very much. And I'm sure you don't hear it enough, but we really appreciate everything that you're doing to keep RecPoker great.
Well, I wouldn't be putting them on if people weren't playing them.
Well, then, thanks to you, the listeners. And if you're enjoying our home games, thanks to you as well. Thanks to the Running Aces Hotel, Racetrack, and Casino. We couldn't be what we're doing without their support. And I just want to tell everyone, go out and play some mixed games. Go out and have some fun. And we'll see you next week here on the RecPoker podcast too. Have a great week.